Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to another week. I'm Charles Freedman. It's News Talk time here on Santa Cruz Voice. We'll be doing this from now till noon, and we certainly hope that sometime during that excursion, you find it convenient to join us. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number, 831-265-5050, to get on the program, talk about what you want to talk about, make the points you want to make, ask the questions you want to ask, and inform us of what you want us to know. I like to be able, if I can, to start off programs with something positive, but this time, often these days it's not possible. And this time, Mr. Trump has really come up with something that deserves to be set down about as hard as it's possible to set anything down. President Trump, to my utter shock and dismay, is now taking us down the Chinese Communist Party highway, state ownership of the means of production. Yeah, that's it. Borrow a page out of Karl Marx. The president has sought a golden share in United States Steel in return for his willingness to allow U.S. Steel to survive, which is what it needed to do by looking at a buyout with Nippon Steel. That kept U.S. Steel in existence, but in return for his permission, Donald Trump exacted a golden share. So now the government owns this golden share of U.S. Steel, which gives it a say in what U.S. Steel does and how it operates. What could possibly go wrong? You know, my mother always used to say there's nothing new under the sun. Everything's been done before, and I guess this has too, but only in foreign countries. We've seen plenty of other countries indulge in government ownership of enterprises. In 1945, a couple of weeks after winning World War II, the British held their first general election in a number of years and put in the Labour Party, which promptly took Britain down the pathway of nationalizing many major industries and companies. You can trace the beginning of the end of Great Britain from that general election. Really, it's a terrible smear on Winston Churchill's record of accomplishment that most crucial election, he not only lost it, he blew it. It was a landslide. Maybe it was something that Churchill couldn't have stopped. Even his eloquence might not have been able, if properly focused, which it wasn't, to prevent the British people from going down the socialist road. From that time forward, Britain's decline, although slow, after all, Britain's an immensely strong country with great traditions and just a foundation of solid granite. But even granite can be worn away over time. And today, Great Britain is basically through. J.D. Vance made a remark the other day that Great Britain was going to wind up being the first Muslim country with atomic weapons. Of course, that was before Pakistan broke that taboo. But just the same, you have a country that has simply thrown its own culture and history out the window. And it started with their economics. You can't have a strong culture without a strong economic base. People have to believe in their futures. So now Mr. Trump is seeking 10% of Intel. You know, in many companies, 10% would constitute the largest single share of ownership. We look at people like Elon Musk, who owns his companies pretty much outright. Oh, he sells stock, but he retains the lion's share. That's not the usual model. That's very unusual. What's usual is that publicly held companies, their shareholders are widely diverse. Much of it is institutional. Insurance companies hold large blocks of stock. Retirement plans, pension plans hold large blocks of stock. But even at that, a major company might have, thousands of stockholders? And no one stockholder holding as much as, say, 10% of the entire amount. But now, 10% of Intel is going to belong to the federal government. Not too long ago, it would have been hard to imagine a Republican president demanding government ownership in a private company. That's what it amounts to. The Trump administration is taking us down new and uncharted roads. This should cause you to, well, I was going to, never mind. This is just so ghastly that I cannot overstate it. The very idea that any American president, I mean, this is the kind of thing that you would expect from Zoran Mamdani or Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. They must be nuts about this. And I'll guarantee you this, they can hardly wait until a Democrat gets into office and begins to get his hands on these particular levers. What a gift the Republicans have given the next Democratic president, whoever that person is. Public ownership of private companies. You look at the income, I mentioned a while ago, communist China. You look at the economy of communist China. To the extent that privatization and private property and profit motive were permitted by the Chinese government, China prospered. And for a while, that permission was rather broad. But now, the Chinese Communist Party is cracking down. They're imposing more and more control, more and more authority over the Chinese economy. The businesses that are favored in this atmosphere are the ones retained by the Chinese Communist Party, the state-owned enterprises, SOEs. These state-owned enterprises are notoriously inefficient, notoriously corrupt. Many of them actually consume more resources than they produce. But they are under the control of the government, and for that reason they are beholden to Xi Jinping, who prizes control over everything else. Maybe that's what's going on in Mr. Trump's mind. The idea that now, with a 10% stake in Intel, he can basically tell them what to do. Mr. Trump has never run a semiconductor enterprise. What could go wrong? This is grand mal ghastly. And somebody ought to get to Mr. Trump and tell him to knock it off. On Friday, he trumpeted that the U.S. government will take a 10% equity stake, that's about $8.9 billion worth of Intel, a maker of computer chips. The president made CEO Lip Bhutan an offer he couldn't refuse. He walked in, wanted to keep his job. He ended up giving us $10 billion for the United States, Mr. Trump said of their meeting this month, a few weeks ago. Mr. Trump demanded Mr. Tan's resignation after Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton alleged he had business entanglements with China that posed a national security threat. The administration was holding up $9 billion in CHIPS Act and defense funds that the Biden team had promised Intel, giving the president leverage over Tan. You see, we see the roots of this in the Biden administration. That CHIPS Act that he put through Congress. Billions and billions of dollars, your dollars, tax dollars, that the government is now using in order to, well, let's be blunt, in order to control chip-making companies. And the government will know best what to do with them and how to run them. The government is tremendously efficient and tremendously prescient at knowing how to get things done, right? Yeah. What we will wind up with is companies run like the post office and Amtrak and the DMV. Those are government-run enterprises. Models of efficiency. In the immortal words of Homie the Clown, I don't think so. A few weeks ago, Mr. Trump demanded Tan's resignation. The CEO made a pilgrimage to the White House. Mr. Trump on Friday recounted their meeting. I said, you know what? I think the United States should be given 10% of Intel. And I think it would be good having the United States as your partner, he agreed. By partner, the president means boss. Federal support may help shore up the chip maker's balance sheet in the short term, but a big risk is that the government will direct Intel's business in a way that will make it harder for the company to become competitive in chip manufacturing and design, which is, after all, what they are supposed to be about. The administration says the deal won't include a seat on the board of directors or governance or information rights, and it will mostly vote its shares with Intel's board, but government support will ease the imperative for Intel to become more competitive. That's one reason China's partially state-owned Semiconductor Manufacturing International has struggled. In the name of competing with China, the U.S. is imitating China's business model. Washington is becoming Chinatown. This is a model that doesn't work. The state-owned sector of China's economy is what's choking it. And the constant channeling of more resource into the state-owned sector and away from the vibrant, innovative private sector is one of the major reasons why the Chinese economy today is stagnating. Mr. Trump is borrowing a failed model. This is one of the most foolish things I think I have ever seen him do. And he has come up with some dillies from time to time. President Trump accused Kamala Harris of being a socialist, but the Biden administration never nationalized companies. No, that's true, but they provided the in. They provided the lever that would open the crack to this type of activity. The Biden team did propose allowing the government to claw back some CHIPS Act money from companies that made excess profits. But this drew opposition from Congress. Why aren't Republicans pushing back on Mr. Trump's Intel deal? They might consider how the next Democratic president could use the government stake to press the left's political imperatives. Intel profits to build low-income housing. Statism is gaining currency on both the political left and right, resulting in a bizarre fusion of ideas. I had an occasional listener this morning send me an email, said, I haven't been able to listen for a while. There have been some things going on. What do you see? And I wrote back one sentence. I wrote back, I am glad to be old and childless. I had just finished reading this column that I've shared with you here. The idea that the Republican Party and a Republican president are now leading America down this ghastly path is enough to make me sick to my stomach. The question is asked here, why aren't Republicans pushing back on Mr. Trump's Intel deal? Republicans are scared to death of Donald Trump. They won't speak out against anything he does. Fortunately, I don't have to worry about that. I have some people who are just, oh, you're criticizing President Trump. You can't do that. Well, don't listen. Mr. Trump can't threaten me. I got nothing to lose. Republicans in office have plenty to lose. Time after time, Republicans who have been critical of Mr. Trump, they find themselves out of a job. And as often as not, their seats, their congressional seats, go to Democrats. Right now, we're in a country where Arizona and Georgia both have 2 Democratic senators. That's insane. But that's part of the new world of Donald Trump, is giving safe Senate seats to the Democrats. We should have 60 seats in the Senate, 58, something like that. We've got a bare majority. Because when Mr. Trump does something this crazy, Republicans who speak up and say, Mr. President, you shouldn't do that. That's a bad idea. Oh, off with their heads. Above criticism. Nuts. Well, I don't know. Most of what I have to say about the president's policies is fairly positive. I tried to look on the bright side. The one issue that motivated me to vote for him, he kept faith with me. I wanted him to prevent the Ayatollah from getting an atomic bomb, and he did it. And later on in the program, I'll have more on his efforts to end the conflict in Ukraine, an effort which, I don't care where you are on the political spectrum, somebody who is working that hard to end that much suffering and killing, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But why at the same time must the president indulge in this Marxian power grab? So under Donald Trump, under a Republican president, for the first time in our 250-year history, the government of the United States is taking ownership of private corporations. That rumbling sound you hear, those are the framers of our Constitution rolling over in their graves. Alexander Hamilton would be appalled at something like this. It's the government's job to create a fertile ground for investment and innovation and enterprise. It is not the government's job to control it. And when the government does control it, inevitably it will be less productive, less innovative. That's simply a matter of reality. And to the extent that we continue to go down that path, we will sacrifice on our own behalf. We'll sacrifice economic growth. We'll sacrifice living standards. Internationally, we'll sacrifice national security because we will be less competitive with other countries, some of whom are our opponents and enemies. Mr. Trump Knock this off. Make some money for the government. You've got a 10% interest in Intel. Sell it. Put it on the market and sell it. Put the money in the Treasury. Sell your golden share of United States Steel. For ownership of it is an abomination and distasteful in the eyes of the Lord and everybody else who has any good sense. I don't know. I can't conceive of such a thing. A Republican president pulling a stunt like this. You know, I'm having a flashback right now to 1968. George Wallace, governor of Alabama, he's running for president. He's bolted the Democratic Party, so now he's running as an independent. He goes around the country saying, "Hey, the dime's worth the difference between the Republicans and Democrats." All my life, I believed that was hogwash. Now it's coming true. Under Donald Trump, there's less and less difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. And the worst part of it isn't because they're taking over our ideas. No, we're taking over theirs. Government ownership of private corporations. Think it over. If you're willing to follow Mr. Trump down that rat hole, then you're the person he was talking about when he said I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and they'd still love me. I'd rather he shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue than pull this nonsense. It's 8:30. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. I will be back in 2 minutes.
It's hot up here. Hi, folks. Warren Knox here of Knox Roofing. Yes, it really does get hot up here, but it's okay because Knox team has been sweating it out on rooftops for 30 summers to make certain your roof will keep you warm and dry through the winter. If you have any doubt about your roof will weather the winter, call Knox Roofing today and ask about a free rooftop inspection. We love it up here. 461-0634. Thanks, folks.
You need a clean, pleasant space to conduct business, but you don't want the burden of a long, expensive lease. Your solution is Satellite Co-working and Digital Media Studio on Soquel Avenue. Satellite offers private offices, meeting and conference rooms, even co-working by the hour, day, week, or month. Schedule a tour at satellitecoworking.com. Mention Santa Cruz Voice for 20% off your first reservation.
Get ready to help build one of America's first local news and talk streaming radio stations. SantaCruzVoice.com. How do you do it? By donating either your time, money, or both. You'll be helping the Voice team construct a powerful infrastructure, one that we can all be proud of. To donate your time, your money, or both, go to SantaCruzVoice.com and click support. SantaCruzVoice.com and click support.
It's high time to celebrate the opening of the new Hook Outlet Dispensary, 1129 Mission in Santa Cruz. Get in on the opening fun and really low prices on the Hook's unmatched selection of top-quality medical and recreational cannabis flower, vapes, drinks, gummies, and concentrates. The Hook Outlet is now the West Side's source for finest cannabis at the lowest prices. Get in on all the opening fun and low prices at the all-new Hook Outlet. HookOutlet.com for details and deals.
Okay, we're back. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. I'm curious, is there anybody out there who sees this differently? Maybe there's plenty. This is Santa Cruz County, the stronghold of Marxism. There should be plenty of people out there who think that for the government to decide to own stakes in private companies, it's just a great idea. I mean, if you look at the percentage of the vote that people like Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris get in Santa Cruz County, there's plenty of support right out there in the Monterey Bay for this kind of nonsense. I wonder how many good card-carrying Santa Cruz County leftists understand what just happened. The Donald Trump they hate, loathe, revile, and despise has just picked up their banner and started running with it. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. If you have something to contribute on that or anything else, you know the rules. Let's move on to more aggrandizing things. Jason Smith is a Republican congressman from Missouri. He is chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. This is a very important position. The House Ways and Means Committee is the one that writes tax bills. Last week, he issued a press release based on an op-ed he wrote in the Washington Examiner, a conservative newspaper, headlined, "Trump's Trade Agenda Will Fuel an Economic Boom." Now, Smith is from Missouri, the Farm Belt. I wonder if he's spoken with workers at John Deere and Company. The farm equipment maker is an American manufacturer that Republicans say tariffs will help. Maybe not. The Moline, Illinois company is laying off 238 workers at 3 factories in Moline, East Moline, and Waterloo, Iowa in the coming weeks. This month, John Deere reported a 26% drop in net income and a 9% decline in sales, owing to lower commodity prices and higher tariffs. Tariff costs of the quarter are approximately $200 million, which brings us to roughly $300 million in tariff expense to date, said Director of Investor Relations Josh Beal. John Deere expects the pre-tax damage from tariffs to reach $600 million in the current fiscal year, up from a previous forecast of $500 million. The hits are coming from President Trump's tariffs on India, the European Union, and his 50% border tax on steel and aluminum. The costs hit Deere's earnings and ultimately employment. What was that again about the new GOP and the working class? This tariff damage isn't surprising, since many U.S. manufacturers rely to some extent on imports of components and raw materials. Caterpillar, another major U.S. manufacturer, has said tariff-related costs could reach $1.5 billion in 2025, including as much as $500 million in the third quarter. Tariffs raise costs, and their uncertain implementation has customers of the equipment makers being more cautious in their investments. Tariff cheerleaders point to promised new investments in the U.S. as a sign of future boom. This is what happens when the world's largest market demands its trading partners stop taking advantage of American workers and farmers and start providing fair and reciprocal access to their markets, Mr. Smith writes. But U.S. trade policy is now far from reciprocal. Mr. Trump is now imposing tariffs even on countries with which the U.S. has a trade surplus. The cheerleaders also ignore damage across the economy and higher costs from new border taxes and fewer sales from retaliatory trade measures. One reason the Farm Belt is struggling, lower exports to China, despite the recent tariff truce. The U.S. exported $5.5 billion in farm goods to China in the first half of this year, roughly half as much as the same period 1 year earlier. The overall U.S. agricultural trade deficit hit a record in the first half of this year, rising to $28.6 billion. Farm exports used to be an American strength. I cannot conceive of the United States having an agricultural trade deficit. How in the world does that work? Perhaps the golden age of tariffs is out there on the horizon, where only someone as far-seeing as Chairman Smith can detect it. But as the midterm elections approach, after all, those are only just a little over a year away, he'd better hope the incentive boost from tax and budget bill he helped write offsets the economic harm to workers like those at the John Deere factories in Waterloo and East Moline. I have tried to keep an open mind on this orgy of tariffs. I still think that increases in taxes cause reductions in economic activity. That's all there is to it. Again, the laws of economics cannot be broken. If you raise taxes on something, you get less of it. And it makes economic sense for a country like the United States to get the things it needs as cheaply as possible by buying them from the lowest possible priced supplier. Instead of owning Intel, right now we get most of our chips from where? Taiwan? Let's just make sure that Taiwan remains a friend. We don't have to. Recently, there was a big controversy over Japan, a Japanese company, I should say, Nippon Steel, coming to the rescue of U.S. Steel. Why? Is Japan, if it was a Chinese company, I could understand. That makes, or a Russian company. That would have set off all kinds of alarm bells. But a Japanese company? A Canadian or British company? Hey, I welcome investment from countries like that. I welcome investment from companies in those countries. This is what makes the world more prosperous. This is what raises living standards. You know, one of the things that's happened in the 20th century, for one reason or another, globalization has become a dirty word, particularly to conservatives, and I don't understand it. I'm a conservative through and through. I'm also have at least a passing acquaintance with the laws of economics. Globalization is, well, I don't know what people mean by the term, but if they simply mean I'm against international trade, my country should be self-sufficient in everything, that is a ludicrous proposition. When were we ever self-sufficient in everything? From our earliest inception. The 13 colonies, which became the United States of America in 1776, were not self-sufficient. We didn't have any manufacturing sector to speak of at that time. We raised agricultural products, and we sold them to buy the things we needed. Eventually, we built up a manufacturing sector, but we still continued to buy things from other countries and from businesses in other countries when we needed them. There are certain things we simply didn't have here in America or couldn't produce in America. America isn't a very good place to produce sugar or bananas, coffee, things that come from tropical climates. Lately, there's a lot of clamor over rare earths. Well, the United States is very rich in fossil fuels, but we don't have that much in the way of rare earths, so we have to get them from someplace else. That's globalization, so far as I can see. That's what it means. The idea that you widen the available sources of supply, thereby, incidentally, causing them to have to compete more with each other and lowering prices and raising efficiencies. If I'm in the market to buy coffee, I want to get it at a good price. A country that can provide me with coffee at $5 a pound, I'm going to do more business with them than some other place where they're selling it for $8 a pound. It's the same thing for these rare earth minerals. They're costly to extract. There are some enterprises that are able to do it at a lower cost per unit than others. That's attractive. That's what you want. Now, do I apply this across the board? Hell no. There are countries in this world who are our enemies. Let's be blunt. I mean, China and Russia today are enemies of the United States. Do I propose to treat them the same way I would enterprises in places like China or Taiwan? Hell no. I'm not nuts. But perhaps what we should be doing is making darn sure that countries like Taiwan and Japan, who are firm and staunch allies of ours and who are valuable trading partners, supplying us with many of the things we need at very reasonable prices, we ought to make damn sure that our security apparatus functions to protect those countries. Oh, but that means that we're spending money to protect them. No, we're protecting ourselves. Think about it. If China took over Taiwan tomorrow, where would the biggest impact be felt? Probably right here in the United States. So it's in our national interest to make sure that we maintain a military establishment capable of, to be quite blunt, intimidating the Chinese into understanding that a military effort to seize Taiwan wouldn't be worth it. That's called deterrence. A successful campaign of deterrence keeps the peace. And that's what we all want, isn't it? We not only keep the peace, but we also keep Taiwan as a partner. And if they make chips better than we do, let's buy their chips. They'll use the money they get to buy something else from us. And if that's globalization, then so be it. It's always intrigued me. The first really serious experiment, what I'm talking about, was a republic called the United States of America, years and years ago. In our Constitution, our original Constitution, dating from 1787, one of the provisions is that no state shall levy duties or tariffs against the products of another state. Now, when we first set up this country, this is something people lose sight of all the time. 1776, we all know 1776, but our Constitution dates from 1787. Those are two different numbers. A difference of 11. 11 years. So for those first 11 years, we didn't have a Constitution. What the hell were we doing? We had the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation failed. This was a really not a good time for the United States of America. We were embarked on this radical experimentation in self-government. We were telling the world we can govern ourselves. We don't need a king. We don't need an established aristocracy. We don't need a papacy that's going to run the country. We are going to have self-government, representative democracy through elected leaders chosen by the people. Wow! And there were a lot of people then in the world who said, oh, you can't do that. It's not going to work. And during the years of the Articles of Confederation, those naysayers were gloating. Look at those stupid Americans. Yeah, they fighting a war for their independence. They can't even run their own country. One of the big problems with the Articles of Confederation was that it allowed each of the states, each of our sovereign states, to coin their own money, and also allowed each of the states to be, let's say, Trumpian in their trade policies. They could levy tariffs. If you wanted to import whiskey from Pennsylvania into New York, There was a tariff, there was a duty. If you wanted to send bushels of wheat or corn or apples from New Jersey into New York, pay the tax, pay the tariff. When the framers of our Constitution gathered in 1787, they had no brief to draw up a constitution. None. The colonies, the states, had sent representatives to a convention to amend or repair or somehow rescue the Articles of Confederation. That was their job. But when they finally met and got together and started talking about it, they very quickly came to realize that that simply wasn't possible. In the words of our modern youth, the Articles were simply too messed up. So one of the first votes they took was whether or not to go beyond their established brief. The choice, either stick with the idea of amending the Articles or throw them out altogether and start with a blank piece of paper and do it right. And by a narrow margin, fortunately, the vote went in favor of throwing out the Articles and doing it right. And one of the things that one of the changes that the Constitution made from the Articles, no longer were the states permitted to coin their own money, no longer were the states permitted to tax each other's products. The United States of America became the first free trade zone in world history. Now, so much was being made of the fact that we were the first republic in history. I mean, the United States of America is a tremendously radical concept. And people were all drawn to that. But what they weren't looking at the same time was the fact that here was this large country, and growing larger all the time, that established absolute free trade by constitutional edict among its states. No tariffs. That, I submit to you, is one of the reasons why the United States of America was able to demonstrate to the world not only a capacity for self-government, but also a capacity for tremendous economic growth, tremendous productivity, a land of opportunity, a place where your dreams can come true, a place where you can come and find work and earn a decent living, have a home, raise a family. Free trade among the states, the sovereign states of America. I don't hear, thank God, I don't hear anyone today proposing that the Constitution be changed in that regard. I have never heard Mr. Trump or anyone else advocate that the states be permitted to tax each other's goods. So even the most obdurate isolationist or economic nationalist seems to understand that free trade within the United States is a good thing, and that even though we have 50 sovereign states, they have no right and should not have any right to levy taxes and tariffs against each other. But for some reason, when we reach the water's edge, all of a sudden all the rules change. The rules of economics don't change. If we want to maximize productivity, if we want to maximize wealth creation, the way you do it is by abolishing barriers to trade. When you levy a tax on something, you're creating a barrier. You're saying, okay, yeah, you can do this, but you have to pay. So it's going to cost you more if you do it. And you may decide not to do it at all. You may decide, oh, geez, if it's going to cost that much, to hell with it. I won't bother. So much wealth creation foregone. So much increase in living standards never experienced. I don't know. So far, the Trump economic policies seem to be one hand giveth, the other hand taketh away. He got a bill through Congress, that reconciliation bill, which prevented tax rates from snapping back to their high levels. That was certainly essential. There were other benefits in the bill. It wasn't a perfect package, but it was a good package. I certainly would have voted for it. But at the same time, Mr. Trump is indulging in policies that are deleterious to the economy. And the question is, which are going to carry the day, which are going to be more effective, the positive policies or the negative policies? And why do we have to have the negative policies? Why can't we just have the positive ones and enjoy economic growth of the kind that helped get Mr. Trump elected? Remember, a lot of Americans voted for Donald Trump in 2024 because they remembered a booming economy under President Trump during his first administration. They said, that was great. We want that again. We're not getting it. Not yet, anyway. I keep hoping. But the one other thing that we have got right now is persistent inflation. The Fed's inflation target remains 2%. We haven't seen 2% inflation in several years now. We're told, well, it's running 2.3, 2.6, 2.8, something like that. So it's close. Close don't make it. Close only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and thermonuclear weapons. Either you are under your target or you're not. And frankly, just between you and me, I've always thought that 2% was too high. I think 1 to 1.5 is more reasonable. Inflation is bad. Bad for the economy, bad for working people. Price stability. Knowing that $1 today is $1 tomorrow and $1 a year from now. And knowing that it'll buy the same, that it's always bought. For years and years, I was getting my milk at Safeway. $3.99 a gallon, $3.99 a gallon, forever. Then it went up to $4.69. Now it's $4.99. That's a $1 increase on $4. That's 25%. And that's just for the milk I buy. 25% increase in price. Don't tell me about 2%. Mr. Trump, during the campaign, promised to get prices back down. He promised to lower prices. Now, I don't know if he can really do that or not. Might be able to. But I know that right now, the policy recipe that he is following is not producing the results he promised. And he has now been in office for, let me see, what is this, August? 7, 8 months. I understand that this economy is a big ship. You don't turn it around on a dime. It ain't no MG. But by the time you have had more than half a year, your policy mix is now affecting our economic results and condition. We are now into the period of time where Mr. Trump and his policies can reasonably be analyzed and judged. That first administration that everybody is so happy with, inflation was way lower than it is right now. Well, at our first call, the guy just called in and immediately hung up. Maybe he butt dialed me. Who knows? 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. It's really okay. We've only got a couple of minutes before the top of the hour, so if you're thinking of calling, a good idea would be to wait a few minutes. As soon as the break has gone by, and we've spent that 6 minutes, then I'll have plenty of time, and I'll take your call, and we'll have plenty of opportunity to discuss what you want to discuss. Caller's back. Well, I've got 2 minutes. Let's see how fast he can say what he wants to say. Oh, he hung up again. Make up your mind. Okay, maybe he decided to take my advice and wait until the next hour. If that's the case, then that gives me something to look forward to. He'll be on the phone, and we'll be able to talk to him at length. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. 831-265-5050. About a minute and a half before the top of the hour. I'm looking at just a couple of little quickies before the time runs out. The other day, there was somebody asked the question, what about artificial intelligence? What jobs will it replace? And Doris Kearns Goodwin, who is a historian of some import, went to ChatGPT, I guess, and asked it, will you replace historians? And the AI responded, probably not. It's great at retrieval and synthesis, but not judgment. And archival work and discovery, human intensive. Interpretation is shaped by lived experience, which is something that artificial intelligence does not have. And collaboration, historians use AI well. So this is the experience that Doris Kearns Goodwin looks forward to. ChatGPT or other AI may help her do her job, but it will not do her job. I wonder what AI thinks of Howard Zinn. Okay, we are now at the end of this hour. See you in 6 minutes. Okay. Whoop.
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words,
many countries in Latin America have been ruined by socialism. I see the United States, and there are so many resemblances to what's going on in Chile. And when we lose the United States, we lose the Western world. My name is Axel Kaiser, and this is my story. I'm a Chilean citizen, I'm a scholar, and a best-selling author. I was born in Santiago, Chile, 4th of July, 1981. My family came from Germany. There was an official policy of the Chilean government in the 19th century to bring Germans to the country in order to help develop the country. So Chile went through a very traumatic period in the 60s and 70s. We had a socialist Marxist revolution, and then the country ended up in a complete crisis with hyperinflation, with scarcity of basic goods and services. My parents who lived through this, they told us these stories. They couldn't find milk for the children. They had to queue for buying toilet papers. Then we had the free market reforms in the 70s and 80s, and the country had a huge process of progress, and these problems went away. We imported from the United States the very good ideas of the Chicago School of Economics, which were really ideas of free market and, rule of law and things like that. And that's why we became the most successful nation in Latin America. But then, gradually, as if we had learned nothing from the past, a discourse started to gain traction, a discourse that was focused on equality, a discourse that was focused on going against people who have been very successful and redistributing a lot from the wealthy. And then the government started growing and growing again, and the country is going back to its very tragic past of economic failure. One of the worst policies was a tax reform, which dramatically increased the taxes on corporations. Now we want to introduce a tax on the wealthy, so the wealthy are leaving the country. We have record capital flights, and as a result of that, we have to take more debt, and then you can have a fiscal crisis and your government can go bankrupt, all because of this woke revolution that we are going through. So another policy that's very toxic is the war that is being waged against the police in Chile. Left-wing woke activists have taken over the judiciary. So the courts have basically not impartial judges, but what they have is activists who are releasing these criminals over and over again. Police don't dare to do anything anymore because the minute they touch someone, media going after them, judges going after them, and their lives are ruined. And this has led to a massive increase in homicides and crime like we had never seen before in Chilean history. And this is heartbreaking to see the place you grew up, being completely destroyed by these ideologies and these ideas. I have been the main face of this battle in Chile for over 10 years. I wrote books, I wrote dozens of articles warning that this was going to happen even 10 years before it happened. And it's very heartbreaking when you have done so much to try to help your country. And I can tell you, once you lose a country, there is almost no way back. It's very hard to recover it. For the last 40 years, the United States served as an example for the whole of Latin America. When we have been inspired by the United States and ideas like freedom and equality before the law, we have been very successful. But now I see the United States, and there are so many resemblances to what's going on in Chile, like the defund the police movement. Cancel culture is driving the public debate. The economy is being destroyed by narratives that try to punish the rich. Chile was the most prosperous nation and the safest nation in Latin America, and now has been ruined by wokeism, and people are leaving the country because it's unlivable. Where are you going to go if you lose your country here in the United States? Are you going to emigrate to Sweden? Are you going to emigrate to Spain, to China, to Russia, to India? This is not an option. When we lose the United States, we lose the Western world. The founding tradition of the United States is the idea of moral equality. That's basically what makes this country unique. It enables people to pursue their own happiness, and in the end, this is the Spain, to China, to Russia, to India. This is not an option. When we lose the United States, we lose the Western world.
And that's the business we're about. Okay. It's almost time to get back to work here. Let's do that, shall we? once again, it's News Talk time here at Santa Cruz Voice. I'm Charles Freedman. Pour that second cup of coffee and get ready to continue the conversation. We had a caller coming in right at the tag end of the last hour who dropped off, and I was thinking maybe it was because he was going to call back at the beginning of this hour. So I'm going to keep my eagle eye on the call board here. Don't feel that you have to wait for anybody. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. Grab that line. Okay, I've spent the first hour today being rather critical of Mr. Trump and his economic policies, particularly this idea of taking state ownership of private enterprises. This is a big step down the road to economic, social, and political hell. And Mr. Trump should be spanked for it. The fact that so few Republicans are taking him to task on it, I find disappointing. This is one where people should just absolutely roar. What else have we seen lately? I've been basically Mr. Positive about Mr. Trump on many of my broadcasts. Today, I think maybe I'll offer some criticisms. Over the weekend, we had a chance to digest the news that John Bolton's home has been raided. Now, John Bolton is not part of the group of people who promoted the Russia hoax. I could understand, for example, if they had raided James Clapper's home or John Brennan's. I mean, they might be looking there for evidence of the, dare I use the word, collusion in framing that outrageous false narrative. John Bolton never did anything like that. Never took part in any of that nonsense. As a matter of fact, he was part of Mr. Trump's first administration. Mr. Trump and John Bolton came to a parting of the ways because, well, Bolton is a bit more bellicose than President Trump. We'll talk more about that later on in the program today, maybe in the third hour. During the recent confrontation over Iran, Bolton would have been, why are you waiting? You know you're going to do this eventually. Go ahead and do it. And I'll admit, I saw logic in that. It's possible that Mr. Trump simply didn't reach the decision to bomb the nuclear facilities in Iran until he did. Or it's possible that he knew all along he was going to do it, but for one reason or another, he waited as long as he did. Mr. Bolton would have been far less patient. If Mr. Bolton were part of today's administration, he would be taking a very cold and clear look at Vladimir Putin, at who he is and what motivates him, and saying, look, if you plan to stop this guy, you're going to have to get serious. Hand-holding on the tarmac in Alaska ain't going to make it. Mr. Trump is playing a different game, and in all honesty, maybe given the realities of world opinion and of international political circumstances, maybe he's doing a better job of it. Quite possibly. That's a matter for debate. We can talk about that. But to send agents to John Bolton's home to conduct a raid there, well, to be quite blunt, I don't understand this. There's no excuse that I can see for it. Bolton has been critical of Mr. Trump's policies. Okay, fine. You can do that. First Amendment of the Constitution says you can be critical of Trump's policies. I spent the first hour of today's program being critical of Mr. Trump's policies. I can do that. If I'm going to do that, I feel compelled to give my reasons. There are plenty of people in the country today who simply indulge in Trump derangement syndrome. They don't like him. They don't care anything about what he does or how he does it or anything else. They simply hate, loathe, and despise the man. I think that's irrational. If I have criticisms to offer, they're based on specific policies and actions, and I attack the policies and actions. I don't attack the man. I said it was ghastly that Mr. Trump had taken 10% of Intel. I did not say that Mr. Trump was ghastly. I don't think that way. For Mr. Trump and his administration to now launch a vendetta of this sort against Mr. Bolton, or anybody for that matter, makes it gives grist to the mill of Mr. Trump's opponents. They now have something they can point at and say, see, look, this guy is using the machinery of the federal government to persecute his enemies. Well, Mr. Trump can point to Clapper, Brennan, etc., even up as far as President Obama, who seems to have been the ringleader of the whole thing. Those people conspired to use the apparatus of the federal government to persecute Mr. Trump. That seems now to be the real story of the whole Russiagate thing. It wasn't the Russians promoting Trump. It was the Americans attempting to destroy him and using the apparatus of the government to facilitate that effort. A terrible thing. One of the reasons Richard Nixon was forced to resign his office was because he had used the federal government and agencies of the federal government to persecute his political enemies. It should be noted, incidentally, that Nixon's real crime there was getting caught. When Lyndon Johnson was reelected in 1964, one of the first things that happened is that prominent supporters of Senator Goldwater were all immediately hit with IRS audits. And for those of you who have never been through one, I guarantee you an IRS audit is one of the most pejorative things the federal government can do to you. Don't think merely in terms of it costing you money, in some cases, sums of money that you really can't afford. The real impact of an IRS audit is, dare I say it, anguish, mental anguish. There are actually people who are involved in sociology, psychology, things like that. They have conducted studies. What are the most stressful things that a human being can endure? The first, top of the list, losing a spouse. I think of, what if something happened to Celeste? You ain't seen no meltdown yet. So that's grand mal up there. But like in second or third or fourth place, an IRS audit. And this is something that, LBJ, of course, was, if you ever want to see the archetype, the paradigm of a corrupt politician, find a picture of Lyndon Johnson somewhere and you've got it. So Nixon wound up paying for a lot of the crimes that LBJ actually committed. And it's the same thing here. Mr. Trump is attempting now, evidently, to, as I say, I understand why he's going after the people who went after him with Russiagate. But why John Bolton? I just can't understand that. It makes no sense to me. It smacks of pettiness. Just, I mean, is there anybody today who is, we see Mr. Trump all over the place doing his best to end the Ukrainian war, where we analyze his moves, we criticize, we make suggestions, etc. Who in the world is paying attention to John Bolton on these issues? Oh, I occasionally see him as a talking head on television, one of hundreds, but certainly with no outsized influence. By doing this, Mr. Trump has now elevated Bolton, one of his critics. Why do that? See, this is one of the things that Donald Trump is in the habit of doing that I've never understood. And this is a tactical criticism, but when you are president or when you are running for president, it is within your choice to decide who you notice and who you don't notice. If you don't notice somebody, you essentially minimize that person. You reduce them. You certainly cut down on their visibility and their influence. When you respond to that person, like Mr. Trump responding to some left-wing journalist at a press conference, you elevate that person. You give that person a platform. You're the President of the United States, and you are dealing one-on-one with this leftist loon. Therefore, more and more people are going to hear what the leftist loon has to say. Why is that? It's because you, Mr. President, made it possible. You amplified their remarks. I don't know, maybe sometime you might do that for comic effect or for amusement or something, but bear in mind, amplifying your opponents, giving them a bigger platform, a bigger megaphone. Why? Let them get their own. And in this particular case, an FBI raid of a man who was in absolutely no way a national security threat. John Bolton is, if anything, a threat to our enemies. This is a guy who is a strong patriot, favors a strong America. But goodness gracious, I cannot conceive of just exactly why this happened. President Trump promised voters during his campaign for a second term that he had bigger things on his mind than retribution against his opponents, but it's increasingly clear that vengeance is a large part, maybe the largest part, of how he'll define success in a second term. His revenge campaign took an ominous turn Friday. FBI agents raided the home and office of Mr. Trump's first-term national security advisor, John Bolton. They brought 2 broad warrants to search the premises. Agents showed up unannounced at his home in Bethesda, Maryland, at 7 in the morning. They confiscated his wife Gretchen's phone because it was visible and not on her person. Mr. Bolton had already left for his office, which is where FBI agents greeted him. The FBI director, Mr. Patel, sent out a cryptic tweet at 7:03, "No one is above the law, FBI agents on mission." He didn't specify to whom he was referring, but the timing is unlikely to have been coincidental. Now, it's hard to see the raid as anything other than vindictive. Mr. Bolton fell out of Mr. Trump's favor in the first term, then wrote a book about his experience at the White House while Mr. Trump was still president. I remember when that happened, and I remember being critical of it. It would have been civil of Bolton to wait until Mr. Trump was out of office. and then write his kiss and tell book. But maybe he needed the money. Anyway, and he is certainly not the only person who have indulged in this particular activity. Mr. Trump tried and failed to block publication. Well, you can't do that. The president then claimed Bolton had exposed classified information, though the book had gone through an extensive pre-publication scrub at the White House for classified material. Bolton was a man who was very conscious of classified material. He would not do that. The book investigation faded away under President Biden, but now it looks as if Kash Patel is reviving it. Whether President Trump ordered the FBI probe or not doesn't matter. The FBI director knows what the president thinks about Bolton, and the president's minions in Trump 2 don't serve as the check on his worst impulses the way grown-ups did in his first term. The presidential id is now unchained. Mr. Trump made clear that when he was out for blood against John Bolton when he pulled the former president's protective detail after his reelection. Now that's dirty pool. John Bolton is widely known as a defense hawk. In 2022, the Justice Department charged an Iranian national it said planned to murder him. This is the kind of guy, the kind of serious enemy of Russia and of the Ayatollah. This is the kind of guy who attracts the attention of assassins. This is the kind of guy that the Ayatollah would put out a fatwa against. This is the kind of guy that Vladimir Putin might decide was the next target for a poison umbrella. Iran has also targeted former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and his major advisor on Iran, Brian Hook. Trump pulled their security details too, confirming it publicly in a way that all but told the Iranians that these Americans were more vulnerable. When you have protection, you can't have it the rest of your life, Mr. Trump said at the time. Kind of reminds me of Salman Rushdie. You remember him? How long ago was it? It wasn't even this Ayatollah. It was the last one. It was Ayatollah Khomeini, the first one, who put out a command. God says this guy has to die. To this day, he goes in fear of his life. And there have been multiple attempts by crazed people to assassinate him. Salman Rushdie lives as a marked man. It's unlikely. Mr. Bolton has had to pay for his own security, though he'd served at the behest of the president. This is the kind of gratuitous viciousness that has increasingly defined Mr. Trump's return to office. It's unlikely that Mr. Bolton broke any laws on national secrets. He certainly didn't share any with us over our long association with him. This is the Wall Street Journal speaking here. But perhaps Mr. Trump intends for the process itself to be the punishment. Even if there's ultimately no criminal charge, Mr. Bolton has to pay for legal counsel, and his family has to endure the anxiety of being under federal government siege. Mr. Bolton has continued to speak candidly about Trump's second-term decisions, pro and con, including in these pages this week. The president may also hope the FBI raid will cause Mr. Bolton to shut up, though knowing him, we can't imagine that working. The real offender here is a president who seems to think he can use the powers of his office to run vendettas. We said this was one of the risks of a second Trump term, and it's turning out to be worse than we imagined. Again, there are people, the never-Trumpers and Trump derangement syndrome people, who are going around saying, this is something new and horrible and we've never seen it before. Yes, we have. We saw it under Lyndon Johnson, and this is one of the things that we also saw under Richard Nixon. And the thing is, that in Nixon's case, they didn't let him get away with it. Who are they? The establishment, the left media establishment, and the government bureaucracy. Mr. Trump is today about the business of attempting to exert more influence over the government bureaucracy. After all, he is the president. And he fights a daily battle with the mainstream media, which of course now has no longer the type of monopolistic control of information and impression that it used to have. But don't kid yourself. The establishment media in this country still throws a very heavy punch. And so far as they're concerned, this will be, oh, it's unprecedented. We've never seen this before. We have seen it before. But it has never been attractive. And it has never been, well, it's never been legal, really. After all, one of the reasons that, when they drew up articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon, one of those articles was that he had used the machinery of the federal government to persecute his enemies. The President of the United States isn't supposed to do that. To the extent he decides to do that, Mr. Trump will feed ammunition to the Democrats who, if they take control of the House next time, will undoubtedly rush to impeach him again. I mean, this will be the first thing on their agenda. That, incidentally, is the biggest single reason that Republicans must keep control of the House in the off-year elections, which is why anything that mitigates against that is a big problem so far as I'm concerned. And that's why I devoted attention in the first hour of this program to the economic impacts of Mr. Trump's policies. If by the time the next election, and it can't wait for the election, the economy has to be humming by next spring or very early summer, because it takes time for these things to soak into the public mind. Good times don't manifest themselves instantly, just as bad times don't manifest themselves instantly. We have leading economic indicators. You've heard of all of that. Well, leading economic indicators and lagging. One of the lagging ones is public perception. In 1984, when Ronald Reagan told Americans that it was morning in America, the entire year of 1984 was an extraordinarily prosperous year. The country was roaring back from a terrible recession, and the inflation that had been hounding the country for over a dozen years had finally been broken. I mean, it was morning in America. Inflation was running at like 0 to 0.5%. Economic growth for the year was something like 6%. It was just amazing. I remember there was a G7 meeting. Was it G7 or G20? Anyway, one of these meetings where, heads of state of the nations of the world get together, and the talk was all people coming up to President Reagan and saying, "Tell us all about the American economic miracle. Tell how you did it." I can only imagine Reagan smiling and telling him to read Milton Friedman or Friedrich Hayek or one of the other conservative economists whose works Mr. Reagan was very familiar with. I wonder, I know darn well that these were works that never impressed Richard Nixon that much. When he was president, economic affairs didn't interest him. He wanted to play on the world stage. He and Kissinger wanted to realign China and things like that. That's valuable stuff. But when it came to managing the economic affairs of the country, Richard Nixon was not really a very good president. If anything, he made the inflation that Johnson had begun even worse. Mr. Trump, during this second term, has not shown the type of grasp of economics that I would look for in a president of the United States. Again, we better hope and pray that this economy is humming by next spring or early summer, because if the House of Representatives goes Democratic in the next election, Mr. Trump's presidency, for all practical purposes, will be over. He'll spend the last 2 years of his office chasing subpoenas and impeachments. 1:30. Let's go ahead and grab a break. Still looking for today's first phone call. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. Give us a buzz when you get a chance.
The Santa Cruz County Fair opens Wednesday, September 10th with FMX Rampage at the Grandstand featuring Adam Jones, X-Game gold medalist with his action team. Thursday, it's the Outlaw Mariachi. Friday, it's the White Album Ensemble. Saturday, Red returns, a Taylor Swift tribute band. And Sunday, the Chata Show, and that evening, Los Dinos. And our drone show at 9 o'clock each night. Pre-sale tickets and information at SantaCruzCountyFair.com.
The Santa Cruz County Fair.
When you need help escaping from an abusive relationship, call on the Angel.
Hello, I am Attorney Angel Hess, and I am ready to help you. Whether you or a loved one needs legal protection from an abusive spouse, cohabitant, or neighbor, I will help you. I have over 7 years' experience working as a lawyer protecting others from abusive relationships.
Stop the abuse now. Call on the Angel, Attorney Angel L. Hess at santacruzlegal.net.
Cannabis is one of nature's most beneficial plants. Hello, I'm Jenna. Treehouse Dispensary, we use information about cannabis to build community. Listen to Carly.
Thanks, Jenna. For those who wake up in the middle of the night, Treehouse suggests a THC CBN chocolate edible blend like Sleepy Time from Sensi Chew. Sleep the night away.
For answers to your cannabis questions, ask your friends at Treehouse Dispensary, 3651 Soquel Drive in Soquel, or ourtreehouse.io.
What's your family eating for dinner? Chef Ben here at the Back 9 Grill and Bar, where you can pick up family dinner that feeds 4 to 6 hungry people. Family meals include a full rack of ribs, a whole smoked chicken, pound of pulled pork, and plenty of barbecue sauce. Served with a full quart of baked beans, coleslaw, macaroni and cheese, dinner rolls, pickles, a side of onions, and for dessert, brownies with a pint of Mary Ann's vanilla ice cream. Call and order your family's dinner about 15 minutes before you want to eat. See you at the 9.
At 10:34, we are just over halfway through today's production. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number, and we have been giving Mr. Trump rather a rough time today, but from time to time he deserves a bit of criticism. The biggest story, however, on the world stage right now is what Mr. Trump is attempting to do to end the war in Ukraine. And here is where I don't know. You know me, I'm impatient. I want to see more pressure brought to bear on Vladimir Putin. I don't want him to succeed in extending his dictatorship any further. Yeah, I'm very clear on who the good guys and the bad guys are. But as I look at the way Mr. Trump is conducting his diplomacy, I can't help but wonder if maybe his tactic of patience, and more patience might be a good idea. The only thing that mitigates against it, and Mr. Trump has made the point himself a number of times, he's saying, look, every day that goes by, more people die. Every week that goes by, more people die. So, for that reason alone, more of a sense of immediacy might be a reasonable approach. Peggy Noonan this week gives her attention to this. I spent time this week talking to people about how to think about the burst of U.S. diplomacy surrounding the Ukraine war. I wasn't sure how to view it, but began with certain predicates. Movement to end war is generally good. New initiatives can be constructive. New focus can encourage things in the right direction. If talks and meetings yield nothing, so be it. But would the world be worse for the effort? Russian President Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov have amused themselves in the last few years, signaling their openness to the use of tactical nuclear weapons. At the moment, we're talking about the exact nature of security guarantees in an overall peace plan. That's a better conversation. Beyond that, be skeptical but not cynical. And do not secretly hope for bad outcomes for those you politically oppose if what benefits them would be good news for the world. I think this would have to be the ultimate manifestation of Trump derangement syndrome. To hate, loathe, and despise the president so much that you want him to fail in his efforts to successfully conclude a brutal and deadly war. Wow. Are you really that mentally are you really that deranged? Really, that is derangement. Are you really that evil? What follows is a combination of the best thoughts and observations on background of two non-MAGA foreign policy professionals of significant achievement. Don't dismiss the current initiative as mere showbiz or posturing. The war in Ukraine has caused devastation, disruption, probably 1 million casualties. Give Donald Trump credit. He lit a fire under the diplomatic dimension. People don't understand what to think because the story changes every day. You can't follow the balls and strikes every minute. You can't follow every pitch. The story's moving all over the place because it's not linear. Because Mr. Trump is not linear. An appropriate attitude is tentative hopefulness. Mr. Trump appears to know Putin isn't someone to bring to agreements. Mr. Trump tries to charm him. Mr. Putin's behavior has led him to understand progress will take time. Vladimir Putin is in no hurry. The next 2 months are still fighting season. In November comes the mud. Russia will use this time to inflict more damage, demoralize more Ukrainians, maybe gain some ground. But Mr. Putin has been getting bad economic soundings from his experts and central bankers. The war has cost him plenty in blood and treasure. Russia hasn't gained much. There's a high cost to perpetually grinding it out. The pieces are there for some kind of a stoppage of the war. The meeting this week of the major leaders of Europe, President Zelensky and Mr. Trump, was a historic 10-strike. More than is probably appreciated. Mr. Putin didn't want to see that meeting, that unity. It was brilliant to have them come to the White House. It underscored America's enduring convening power, and it was an admission of their calculation as to Mr. Trump's stature. France, Germany, Britain, Italy, Finland, the EU, and Mr. Zelensky pulled together. They want Ukraine saved and the war over. They don't know if Mr. Trump can handle Mr. Putin, but they badly want him to. Because while Mr. Putin lives, the future of Europe is in play. That's a terrible fact. And from outward appearances, they are facing it. Mr. Trump's foreign policy team is coming into its own. Secretary of State Rubio, Treasury Secretary Bessant, Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane, they're the forces around U.S. foreign policy, behind the careful negotiating of things. John Ratcliffe, Director of CIA, has also emerged as a voice. The devil, as always, is in the details, and some details are essential. What exactly do the Europeans and Americans mean by security guarantees for Ukraine? Obviously, it's going to have to be something concrete rather than something on paper. Why would I say that? Well, think back, 30 years? Yeah. The Soviet Union has fallen apart. Ukraine is now an independent country for the first time since 1918. And Ukraine is the place where many of the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons have been stationed. Suddenly, Ukraine is the world's third largest nuclear power. Well, the Russians say, look, those are our nukes. The Ukrainians say, yeah, we're willing to give them back, but in return, we want your assurance that you will not violate our sovereignty. You will not invade. Pretty simple thing, pretty low bar, wouldn't you say? Don't invade us. stay on your side of the border, do your thing. We're not going to invade you. Contrary to Mr. Trump's sometime assertions, you don't pick a fight with a country a lot bigger than you are. Well, Mr. Trump, Ukraine didn't pick this fight. And when you make statements like that, it is remarkably unhelpful. I noticed that Mr. Trump has, for the most part, backed off of that. Although I did hear him honk that horn one time in a telephone interview just a few days ago, and I was thinking, are you still playing those records? But again, the main thing that Ukraine wanted was simply a guarantee, a security guarantee. That's what we're talking about here, isn't it? Security guarantees. Well, Russia signed such a security guarantee with Ukraine, and there were other countries. I believe the United States and Great Britain were both parties to that agreement. And when Mr. Obama was in office, the Russians broke it and took Crimea. And when Mr. Biden was in office, the Russians broke it and invaded the country at large. Now Mr. Trump is faced with the rather difficult job of trying to put all that toothpaste back into the tube. Wow. Thanks a lot, Joe. Thanks a lot, Barack. But we're back up against that issue of security guarantees again. The last time, the Russians gave security guarantees. The Ukrainians had security guarantees. Turned out not to be worth a plug nickel. And that is why last week on this program I suggested that this time the security guarantee, we ought to study the Korean model. There's going to have to be an external force. And it will have to involve some Americans. The idea that it be all American, no. No, it should be Americans and other European nations. Not acting as NATO, but simply acting on their own. And Mr. Putin is going to scream like a wounded bull elephant. He'll never accept that. So let's see what Ms. Noonan thinks of that. What will Mr. Zelensky accept? And Mr. Putin, the definition of success can't be peace at any price. It has to be a peace that establishes a certain order and stability so it can settle in. What if Putin endlessly plays things along? It may well prove true that Mr. Trump was too quick to stop his own push for a ceasefire, accepting instead an aim for a peace agreement. A ceasefire means everyone stops shooting. You don't have to drop your demands or your claims or even your delusions. You just have to put down your gun and begin negotiating toward peace. Ceasefires don't have to be short-term. Some last 50 years. Many Ukrainians and Russians will die without one. Basically, a ceasefire is what, again, I return to the Korean model. We've had a ceasefire that has lasted my entire lifetime, over 70 years. A flawed solution? Hell yes. But nobody's getting shot. There are saying that Mr. Trump is a naïf, a fool propelled by his own vanity. If that's true, and it wouldn't be shocking, well, would you be shocked? It would be more important soon enough. And the overall effort will likely fizzle. They'll make fun of him for wanting to win a Nobel Peace Prize, but so what? It's a prize for peace, not war. It'd be a better world if every leader competed for one. Mr. Trump told Sean Hannity this week that he's pushing for peace in part because he wants to go to heaven. That's what we call a new one. Whether he was serious, or the line just jumped into his head, or was the kind of formulation to which Mr. Hannity seems receptive, heaven is not a terrible reason to want to do something. And it's preferable to see you in hell, suckers. It's hard to imagine the effort succeeding. But why begrudge President Trump for trying? Instead, he could have spent the last few months telling Mr. Zelensky, hey, you're on your own. Good luck maintaining your status as a sovereign nation. Much of his base would have liked that just fine, but he didn't do it. When J.D. Vance was running for the Senate in Ohio 3 years ago, he reacted to news of Russia's invasion with, "I really don't care what happens to Ukraine one way or the other." I remember that. And I remember thinking that probably cost him election. He won anyway. But it was difficult for me to see how a person like me, for example, could vote for a guy capable of making a statement like that. I really don't care what happens to Ukraine one way or the other. That's like an American in 1940 saying, "I really don't care what happens to Poland one way or the other." And there were plenty of Americans saying that. They learned the hard way how wrong they were. You know, in a way, it's too bad World War II is so far in the rearview mirror now. The generation that fought it are all dead. And my generation, the first post-war generation, grew up in that atmosphere and internalized a lot of those messages. Among them, appeasement and isolation are not a policy. The ostrich approach to world affairs is a sure way to get your butt kicked. And the longer you play ostrich, the harder the kick gets. I'm told the vice president isn't playing the part of the hardline isolationist, now having constructive talks with Russians and Ukrainians. This might be because he hopes to be part of building something helpful, successful, and significant. It may also be because if you want to be president, the last thing you need for Ukraine is to collapse in, say, 2027 or 2028. Mr. Vance these days is a far cry from Mr. Vance of 3 years ago. And I'm glad of that. It's basically, he's obviously an extremely bright guy and very good at handling himself. He does a lot better job at presenting this administration and its policies than President Trump does. And for him to now come to a realization of the realities of the world by, experiencing them firsthand, this is not a bad thing. In any case, things are breaking in interesting ways. I close with an attitude toward history that can be a helpful attitude toward life. It's an old folk tale. A horse thief is arrested. He's found guilty. The king sentences him to death at dawn. The horse thief, wait a minute, please. There's something I've never told anyone. I not only steal horses, I have a power to make them laugh. It's a gift. Give me a month and I'll train one of the horses, the king's horse, to laugh at all his jokes. So the king agrees to this. Days later, a guard, seeing the thief is getting nowhere with the horse, asked why he'd made such a stupid promise. The thief said, "Well, in a month the king may die, and everyone forget why I'm here, and release me. Or I may die, or the horse may laugh. Take a chance. Try something. You never know." There'll be plenty of time to laugh at Mr. Trump in coming months and years. Madeleine Albright once observed that when Americans talk foreign policy, everything always comes down to either Munich or Vietnam. If this is Munich, we'll know it soon enough, but we don't know it now. Hope for the best. Maybe the horse will laugh. That's again Peggy Noonan's observations on Mr. Trump's peacemaking efforts. And I particularly like what she had to say about, what if he is attempting to win a Nobel Peace Prize? What a worthy goal. What a fine thing for a national leader to set about. What a positive thing. I've got something more here on the Ukraine situation. An interview with Stephen Kotkin that I think you'll get some value out of. But I'll excuse me. I'll save that for the last hour because it takes a little more than the 8 minutes or so that we have left here. review essay this week on the front page of that section of the Wall Street Journal is by David Lunow and Tom Fairless. The title of it is Europe is Losing. And as I read it, I've got to admit I found myself more and more discouraged. European nations have fallen behind in economic dynamism and clout. Will a continent that once ruled the world become a bystander to history? It seems more and more that way. The paradigm for all of Europe is Great Britain, which indulged in socialism following World War II, and is now compounding that felony by indulging in climate insanity. UK is only one of the European countries that have adopted net zero emissions as an official policy. I saw a piece just yesterday indicated the economy of Germany, and Germany has been the economic engine of Europe for some time now. Oh, granted, other countries have GDPs and are productive, but Germany has been the one that is really the workhorse, the powerhouse. Germany's economy is now shrinking. They are in recession. And the main single reason is that energy has become so expensive. Germany actually outlawed nuclear power. And right next door is France, whose countryside is dotted with nuclear reactors that supply an overwhelming percentage of France's electrical power with no air emissions of any kind. If you want clean energy, the French have solved the problem. Germany, right next door, has slammed the door on it. It's inconceivable that they would be so short-sighted. Germany also has, I believe, natural gas reserves. If they would do some hydraulic fracturing, they would liberate them. And this would enable them to at least be able to power their industrial machine, which is what runs their country. The Germans have an export-oriented economy. They make things that the rest of the people of the world want. Made in Germany is a label that's respected by people. They understand the German products are generally of very high quality, and they're marketed internationally. These have yielded Germany a high standard of living and a wealthy country. And now Germany is walking away from that model. And this piece makes it clear that that German choice is simply being generalized. They begin by mentioning space exploration and space accomplishment. On May 13th, Elon Musk's SpaceX launched 28 satellites into orbit in a single day. I had no idea that SpaceX was that active. 28 satellites launched into orbit on a single day, one of over 100 successful U.S. orbital launches this year. China has sent more than 40 rockets into space since January. Russia, bogged down the war in Ukraine, has launched 10 rockets. Europe has launched 4. Even that is an improvement. For over a year, the continent relied on SpaceX to launch critical infrastructure. Falling behind the space race is just one example of how Europe has lost its way. The extraordinary continent occupies just 4% of the world's landmass, not including Russia. It shaped human history for good and ill more than any other region for 500 years. European nations conquered and administered as much as 80% of the planet. Their wars killed millions, redrew the global map. Europe was the birthplace of modern capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. They gave us cars, trains, penicillin. Its art and music still fill museums and concert halls around the world. But today, Europe, particularly Western Europe, is adrift, an aging continent slowly losing economic, military, and diplomatic clout. Europe shaped history, but the risk now is we're simply bystanders going forward. This, according to Jeremy Gallon, a French diplomat The continent's economies have been largely stagnant for 15 years. According to the Deutsche Bank, Germany's economy is 1% bigger than it was at the end of 2017. 2017, that's 8 years ago. During that same period, the U.S. economy has grown 19%. Oh my God. European household wealth has grown by a third as much. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about these energy policies. Per capita GDP in the U.S. is now $86,000 a year. In Germany, $56,000. In the UK, $53,000. This is what a lack of affordable energy does to a society. It is a death sentence. Mr. Trump can point to many accomplishments since becoming president again, but perhaps the most important is his absolute willingness to fly in the face of net zero nonsense. He went so far as to go to Europe not that long ago and tell them to their faces, this is terrible, you've got to stop it. Modern societies run on energy. And incidentally, what's the latest thing to come down the pike nowadays? That's right, artificial intelligence, AI. That's the next big thing. And AI is an energy hog. In Pennsylvania, they are restarting the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant to get enough energy for an AI installation. Now, the reactors at 3 Mile Island can be operated safely, so obviously there's no major danger going on there. But my God, this goes to show just exactly how important it is to get sources of dependable, affordable energy online as quickly as possible. Germany and the rest of Europe are still caught in this net zero mania. And as long as they continue to suffer from that delusion, this headline here, Europe is losing, is going to continue to have countenance. Giorgia Meloni, Prime Minister of Italy, put it very succinctly. America innovates, China imitates, Europe regulates. I was charmed by some of the examples given here. An attempt to build a new tunnel under the Thames River outside London so far has spent $340 million on planning permits. Documents that hold 359,000 pages. This is crazy. Games Workshop, a fast-growing gaming company, is facing delays to build a new parking lot on its headquarters because a single bat lives there. Oh my God. Well, okay.
The founding tradition of the United States is the idea of moral equality. That's basically what makes this country unique. It enables people to pursue their own happiness, and in the end, this is the way that prosperity is achieved, by people collaborating in mutual arrangements and free exchanges, and not by government telling you what you have to do. That's, I think, the main difference between Latin America and the United States. Latin America is dominated by narratives that are very much against individual liberty and that are in favor of government intervention. And the left doesn't like personal liberty because it goes against their agenda to be able to control people's lives and to concentrate power in their own hands. In 2019, when we had huge problems in Chile, we had a social crisis, people went on the streets, then the far left pushed the agenda that what Chile needed in order to solve this social crisis was a new constitution. And what they really wanted was to create new laws that would destroy all limits on government power, and they could impose their ideology on everyone else in the country, even children. And for that, they needed a new constitution. Latin America is the region in the world with the most constitutional experiments. And every time we have tried it, it has been a complete failure. It has enabled demagogues and populists to take over power and destroy individual freedom and destroy the economy and destroy everything. And the mother of all battles is the American Constitution. The Constitution in the United States is a beacon of freedom, and I don't like the talk about changing it or getting rid of the Electoral College. That's the way you really lose democracy. It's not by having one side winning the elections or the other, it's by destroying the institutions. It's very, very hard to build, and it's very, very easy to destroy. For us in Chile, we lost our country because we were not able to appreciate what we had. We really even created a myth that this was the most unequal, the most unfair country in the history of Latin America. And in the end, we hated our country so much that we put in charge of it people who destroyed it. It happened so fast. This is the part that's most disconcerting. So it's heartbreaking to see the place you grew up, being completely destroyed by these ideologies and these ideas. And I hope that's something that doesn't happen to people here. And that's why I like the United States, because I see more people willing to fight for this country than I saw in Chile, people willing to fight for ours. If you don't fight back then, that's when you lose.
once again, welcome to hour number 3 of the Charles Freedman radio program for this lovely Monday. 831-265-5050 is the number. I just happened to think of something. We're still looking for our first phone call of the day, so if you get the urge, don't forget to give vent to it. 831-265-5050 is our number. I promised you something a bit more in depth on Ukraine in this hour, and I have it in the form of an interview with Stephen Kotkin. Now, Mr. Kotkin is a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and at NYU Law School's Classical Liberal Institution. He's a historian of Russia, and so obviously he's thoroughly versed in the country that we're confronting right now. So let's find out what his observations are concerning Mr. Putin. And the headline here is a very heartening one. With Putin, ultimately Trump holds the cards. Now, I believe that too, and I'm very interested in seeing why this exceptionally well-informed individual thinks the same as I do on this topic. The stereotype of Donald Trump as a puppet of Vladimir Putin, this was Hillary Clinton's term from a 2016 debate, is plainly nonsensical. The president demonstrated the point on Thursday by complaining on Social Truth about crooked and grossly incompetent Joe Biden would not let Ukraine fight back, only defend. How did that work out? But Mr. Trump has been far from consistent in his approach to the Russia-Ukraine war. What do we make of him and his relationship with the Russian dictator? Nobody can do more damage to President Trump than President Trump, Stephen Kotkin says. Putin is actually afraid of Trump. Trump is the only one who could hurt Putin in a big way. Few in the West have a deeper understanding of Mr. Putin than Kotkin. 66 years old, a historian whose monumental biography of Joseph Stalin, one of Putin's heroes, awaits its third and final volume. Kotkin is a fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institute, a professor emeritus at Princeton. His comments shouldn't be taken as a show of admiration for President Trump. At an August 15th Alaska summit, which Mr. Kotkin disdainfully calls the president's surrender photo op, Mr. Putin evidently told Trump that Russia is going to win anyway, so let's just hand the territories over to Russia and save lives in the process. But Mr. Trump cannot surrender Ukraine, he says. The Ukrainians are not going to accede to that, and Mr. Trump cannot grant Putin a sphere of influence in his neighborhood because it's been lost for good by Putin himself. Mr. Kotkin is similarly scornful of Monday's White House summit with Ukrainian President Zelensky, which he calls the European rescue photo op. European leaders are talking about providing security guarantees. Well, if they could do that, why are they flying to the White House to ask President Trump to make them do that? They were there to beg the president to help them deliver security. There was lots of theater, melodrama, and attention on President Trump, which of course is what he's after. But I don't know what, if anything, really happened in terms of Ukraine's self-defense against Russia. Speaking by Zoom from his office, he's keen to establish that we have to grasp three truths in the big picture of the war in Ukraine. His first is the paradox that people usually don't get put together. Although much smaller, Ukraine may be losing a war of attrition, Mr. Putin made an enormous strategic blunder and is damaging Russian security for the long term. He has lost his country's old sphere of influence. All his neighbors hate him and are afraid of him. Even Alexander Lukashenko, the puppet dictator and fraternal neighbor of Belarus, is looking for some distance to get out of the stranglehold of Russia. Mr. Putin has also lost his civilian economy. Second, Ukraine is an asset, not a liability. We don't seem to be able to appreciate how it's an asset and why. He means that Ukraine has an army, a serious one, unlike, say, Germany. we've been able to send a lot of our weapons and test them in the battlefield conditions because of Ukrainian bravery and ingenuity. As a result, we've been able to see what a 21st century land war looks like. We've been able to change our defense industrial investments at home as a result. He adds that military aid to Ukraine is actually going to the American defense industry. This is a very telling point. When the point is made, well, we've spent $250 billion on Ukraine. Where did that money go? It went to Raytheon and to the other companies here in America that build the weapons that we've been sending to Ukraine. Military aid to Ukraine employs Americans because those military items, that hardware and that ammunition are made here by Americans. Third, Mr. Trump is correct to seek an end to the war. I applaud his forced imposition of a negotiation process, but the president lacks follow-through and patience. He lacks consistency. This is a hard problem. I disagree with Mr. Kotkin here. He lacks patience? I see him as being too patient. I see him as, Mr. Kotkin, what are you saying? I mean, you may have all these degrees and everything, but, I feel perfectly competent to go toe-to-toe with you on that. He lacks consistency. Well, I'll grant you that. This is a hard problem. He promised to solve it in 24 hours, but it's been going on since 1783, when Catherine the Great annexed the Khanate of Crimea. Even so, Trump's instincts are correct. Ukraine, more than Russia, needs this war to end, and he's groping toward that solution. Mr. Kotkin warns against facile obsessions with winning. We talk all the time, he said, about who's going to win the war. What matters more is winning the peace. In Afghanistan, America won the war and lost the peace. In Vietnam, same thing. What does that mean for Ukraine? Russia is a giant neighbor armed with nuclear weapons, willing and able to build a war machine well beyond its GDP and ostensible means, and indifferent to the loss of its own lives. Winning the peace isn't easy against a foe like that. That's the conundrum we face. We have faced it from the beginning, but we haven't faced up to it. In the minds of most Ukrainians, and many friends of Ukraine in high places, a win must include the return of Crimea, which Russia conquered in 2014. We're all talking about how Ukraine needs to get Crimea back, because Russia took it by a violation of international law, Mr. Kotkin says with the laugh of an unsentimental realist. Crimea is going back to Ukraine the day after Texas goes back to Mexico. Unfortunately, that makes sense to me. Oh, there may come a time. But right now, it's not in the cards. Then he proposes a careful what you wish for exercise, inviting me to fantasize. Suppose Crimea is back with Ukraine. Then Russia has 2 million ethnic Russians inside the Ukrainian state and can mount a permanent insurgency and sabotage campaign. I wonder if that would happen. Bear in mind, people's minds can be changed by the conditions imposed upon them. I'll give you an example. Ukraine in 1941, when Hitler invaded, Barbarossa is launched, Ukraine is right there on the border. The first thing that happened is the German Wehrmacht sweeps into Ukraine, and the Ukrainians come out with bread and wine and welcome them with open arms. Why? Because of the way the Ukraine had been treated by the Soviet Union and Stalin. Millions starved to death. Millions more deported to the Gulag. Soviet rule in Ukraine was brutal. And so when a foreign invader came, oh boy, a foreign invader, a liberator. The answer to our prayers. The problem was the Germans were even worse than the Soviets had been. If they had simply met the Ukrainians as even as a conquered people, but accorded them some level of human respect. But no, to the Germans, I mean, remember, Hitler, the ultimate racist, according to him, these were Slavic peoples. The only role that Slavic people had was to be menials, basically slaves of the German Übermensch. So this incredible wave of good feeling and positive vibration that Ukrainians felt toward Germans instantly evaporated, and they were happy to have the Soviets back, if you could imagine that. But again, people react to how they're treated. Now, ethnic Russians in Crimea and eastern Ukraine had the experience of being ethnic Russians in Ukraine. And they were being egged on all the time by the Russians, you know, radio broadcasts and newspapers and things coming in across the border. Those Ukrainians, they're terrible people, and you should hate them. But now that eastern Ukraine and Crimea have been under Russian control for a while, from the accounts I've read, these ethnic Russians, many of them, are very interested in having Ukrainian administration back. Maybe the Ukrainians were foreigners to them, but they treated them better than the Russians do. And again, it's how people are treated that will shape their loyalties. So when Mr. Kotkin goes on about how ethnic Russians inside the Ukrainian state are going to be a permanent source of insurrection, I don't know. I don't know if I go along with that one either. There's also the threat of external force. The return of Crimea to Ukraine would incentivize Russia to attack again tomorrow, or 20 or 30 years from now. Regaining Crimea is a terrible thing for Ukraine winning the peace in the long term. Now, that does make sense. The West needs to understand that what makes sense to some people in terms of violation of norms and stability of national order as a whole may not make sense for the Ukrainian cause that they're advocating for. Well, I've felt for some time that people who are insisting that all territories, including Crimea, be restored to Ukraine, are being brutally unrealistic. And Mr. Kotkin shares my thoughts on that. So, you know, some of this other stuff notwithstanding, I think it's safe to say that a settlement here is not going to involve Crimea becoming Ukrainian territory again. Unless, of course, the Ukrainians can retake it militarily, which I absolutely do not think is going to happen. Well, one thing I might mention in this mix, there is a headline today that gives me some pause. Pentagon has quietly blocked Kiev's missile strikes on Russia. The United States Pentagon has for months been blocking Ukraine's use of long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. If this story is true, this is a very foolish move. Limiting Kiev from employing a powerful weapon in its fight against Moscow's invasion. A high-level Defense Department approval procedure, which hasn't been announced, has prevented Ukraine from firing U.S.-made long-range attack missile systems against targets in Russia since late spring. Well, if President Trump really believes what he was saying about forcing a country to always fight on defensive and forbidding them to go on the offensive as being critical, and then expecting any kind of a positive result, that was a very reasonable thing, a very great observation by the president. This is a policy. Now, maybe this is a policy that the president isn't aware of. Say, is that possible? Yeah. In this government bureaucracy, it is entirely possible. A few weeks ago, I would remind you, there was a momentary pause in military aid to Ukraine. And at the time, it looked like it was initiated by Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary. And within something like 48 hours, that policy was contravened by the president. Now, this may be another example of it. What's the language used here? A high-level Defense Department approval procedure, which hasn't been announced, has prevented Ukraine from firing these missiles into Russian territory. On at least one occasion, Ukraine sought to use these missiles against a target on Russian territory, but was rejected. That shouldn't be happening. A country that's capable of carrying out that operation they did a while back, where they blew up a good portion of the Russian tactical strategic bomber fleet, that should inspire some confidence. A country that's capable of pulling that off should get a green light on any operation it cares to pull. So, back to Mr. Kotkin's musings here. How could Ukraine win the peace? Membership in NATO is out of the question, if only because the United States opposes it. The alternative is joining the West through accession to the European Union. They'll need massive domestic reforms to be able to join, but it's a great process for bringing countries into constitutional rule of law, open society, and market economy institutions. The other marker of a Ukrainian win is some type of security, which people call security guarantees, which looks more like a steel porcupine approach. This is a phrase that Kaja Kallas, the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, introduced in March. What is a steel porcupine? European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen defines it as fortifying Ukraine to make it undigestible for potential invaders. Mr. Kotkin said it would mean helping Ukraine set up a strong defense establishment with weapons production at home and continued financing for that from its European partners. So you get both EU accession and a version of security where Ukraine is doing most of the heavy lifting. Bear in mind, Mr. Putin, in his Bill of Particulars, setting out what he wants, insists on Ukraine being neutral and having no military establishment. To borrow a phrase here, that's going to happen when Texas goes back to Mexico. Mr. Putin's wish list is utterly unreasonable and unrealistic. He probably knows and understands that. He figures these are bargaining chips that he'll have to give away. It'll be interesting to see what he gets for them. A win for Mr. Putin would have grave consequences for the West. The Russian dictator is looking for the surrender of Ukraine and the surrender of the United States. He wants to subjugate Ukraine, to destroy it as an independent state, but more than that, he wants to destroy the Reagan-Bush Cold War victory. He has said it. In his view, the worst day of the 20th century wasn't Pearl Harbor, wasn't when World War I broke out. Oh no, the worst day of the 20th century was the day the Soviet Union fell apart. Because he understood it for what it really was, a Russian empire. You look at our American Union, for example, you see 50 states, there are various sizes. But no single state is absolutely dominant. You look at the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. I believe there were 15 socialist republics. One of them, the Russian socialist republics, comprised something like 90% of the land area, or 85% of the land area, 80% of the population. I mean, this was basically the Russian Empire wearing communist clothes. And Mr. Putin thoroughly understood that. Above all, he is a nationalist, a Russian nationalist. And unfortunately, unlike, say, Alexander II, or the tiny number of other enlightened people who've shown occasionally in Russia, the Peter Stolypins of the world, Mr. Putin is much more of a traditionalist. He sees Russia as a country that is by nature an empire, and whose natural state is to invade, conquer, and occupy adjoining countries. This is what Russia does. It's kind of like, remember the old stories of the German mentality, particularly the Prussian mentality? What does the Prussian want to do? He wants to conquer the next country. This is one of the reasons why Bismarck was so successful once he had cobbled Germany together from Prussia and the other German states and created modern Germany in 1871. The first thing he sought was peace. At this point he said, we have, if you look at Imperial Germany as it looked at that time, I mean, a tremendous country sitting utterly astride Central Europe. That Germany is a powerhouse. It has agricultural land, it has mineral resources, it has energy resources, it's got everything. And Bismarck knew that. She said that the main thing Germany needs now is peace. We're not interested in going to war with anybody. Well, of course, then what happened? The old Kaiser died, Kaiser Bill comes along, and one of the first things he does is tie a can to Bismarck. The wise old man, whose counsel he could have used, had he heeded it, was the first person he tossed over the side. The Kaiser was a lot like Vladimir Putin. Gimme, gimme, gimme. I want more, I want more, I want more. And of course, a few million lives later, he wound up abdicating, spending the rest of his life in Holland. I wonder if Vladimir Putin will ever abdicate. I doubt it. That's generally not what happens in Russia. The only Russian leader I can think of who ever actually had a life in retirement was Nikita Khrushchev. He was deposed by the Politburo in 1964, and instead of being given a ride, they provided him with a nice dacha, and he was able to tend his flowers and like that, and live out the rest of his life in peace. A rare exception, and I would say almost a unique exception among Russian leaders. The only one I can think of who actually lived a long life after being in power was Kerensky, and of course he was only running things for a few months during the provisional government in 1917 before being overthrown by the Bolsheviks. It's half past. I'll continue this after our break. Let's go ahead and play some important messages and remind everybody the telephone number is 831-265-5050. You still have the opportunity to be today's first caller, provided you make the call.
It's hot up here. Hi, folks. Warren Knox here of Knox Roofing. Yes, it really does get hot up here, but it's okay because Knox team has been sweating it out on rooftops for 30 summers to make certain your roof will keep you warm and dry through the winter. If you have any doubt about your roof will weather the winter, call Knox Roofing today and ask about a free rooftop inspection. We love it up here. 461-0634. Thanks, folks.
You need a clean, pleasant space to conduct business, but you don't want the burden of a long, expensive lease. Your solution is Satellite Co-working and Digital Media Studio on Soquel Avenue. Satellite offers private offices, meeting and conference rooms, even co-working by the hour, day, week, or month. Schedule a tour at satellitecoworking.com. Mention Santa Cruz Voice for 20% off your first reservation.
Get ready to help build one of America's first local news and talk streaming radio stations. SantaCruzVoice.com. How do you do it? By donating either your time, money, or both. You'll be helping the Voice team construct a powerful infrastructure, one that we can all be proud of. To donate your time, your money, or both, go to SantaCruzVoice.com and click Support. SantaCruzVoice.com and click Support.
It's high time to celebrate the opening of the new Hook Outlet Dispensary, 1129 Mission in Santa Cruz. Get in on the opening fun and really low prices on the Hook's unmatched selection of top-quality medical and recreational cannabis flower, vapes, drinks, gummies, and concentrates. The Hook Outlet is now the West Side's source for finest cannabis at the lowest prices. Get in on all the opening fun and low prices at the all-new Hook Outlet. HookOutlet.com for details and deals.
At 11:32, we are back and continuing with this interview with Stephen Kotkin at the Hoover Institute on the question of the Ukraine war. And hey, we've got Zach on the line. Well, first phone call of the day. Let's grab it right away and find out what's on the man's mind. Hello, Zach. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for taking the call. Yeah, I just wanted to call. I've been listening. I just haven't had a time to call in. Now I do, and I've got to compliment you on two things. First of all, your book recommendations, excellent as usual. I purchased the Wilfred McClay. Wait, I forgot his name. But the history book you recommended.
Yes.
Because I have two young kids. So I told them, hey, I need at least a half hour of your time. Set down the devices and come sit with your dad on the couch and we'll read this book. So, and it's a fun read. It's actually not boring at all. It's really well written, and it seems like it is. I haven't really gotten into it yet, but yeah. So we're gonna read that, and also, your homie the clown impersonation is spot on.
Well, I was a great fan of In Living Color.
Yes.
Thought that was a fantastic show. The Wayans brothers are amazing. If you ever want to watch a funny movie in your life, one of their movies, it's called I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker.
Oh, gosh, I haven't seen that in years.
You saw it, huh?
I forgot. A long time ago.
Yeah.
I need to rewatch that.
My wife is African American, and I went into my collection of videos. I pulled that up. She had never seen it.
Uh-huh.
And she was laughing so hard that she wound up with a stomach ache. I mean, there were a couple of places where I had to stop it so that she could, recompose herself and we could keep watching. But yeah, I had done a little bit of Fly Guy at the Pimp's Poetry Reading Contest. Remember that? He comes in.
Yeah, I barely. Yeah.
Now, my poem is called "My Bitch Better Have My Money."
Yeah, it's just absolute.
And the guy's he's got these platform shoes on. And they're about 3 or 4 inches high, and they're filled with water, and there's goldfish in them.
Oh, just over the top, yeah.
I'm Going to Get You, Sucker is one of the funniest movies ever made. That, and now this one is, I think there's, Keenan Ivory Wayans is in it, but it's it's a Robert Townsend film. It's called The Hollywood Shuffle.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Now, the theme of the Hollywood Shuffle, it's all about the fact that in motion pictures, even to this, I watch a lot of old movies, and black people are always, either, of course, if it's a woman, it's probably a maid or a housekeeper, and if it's a guy, it's probably a bellboy or somebody, and they always play it the same way. Hattie McDaniel, the great actress who picked up an Oscar for playing Mammy in Gone with the Wind, once said, in Hollywood, I had two choices. I could either play a maid or be one. Well, that was then.
Yeah.
But Robert Townsend, 40 years later, 50 years later, made another movie in which he's talking about, okay, these are the roles that are reserved for black performers. And basically it's, street people, pimps, thugs, hookers, etc., etc. The roles are different from what they used to be, but they are still stereotypical roles for black actors and actresses. And that's what the Hollywood Shuffle is all about. He plays the part of this young man who has a day job, but he wants to be an actor, and what he's going through. And it's, once again, it's funny as hell.
I will look that one up and watch it for sure. Man, that sounds, a lot of that black exploitation is what they call it, like kind of parodying, newer films that are parodying, like the perception of what the movie companies used to, portray black people as is just when they make fun of that, it is really good. It's really funny.
One of the funniest bits you'll see is there's this black acting school, and in it you're taught to speak, in this shuck and jive type, and here's how you walk and all that, and all of the instructors are white.
Oh my God. That's good. Oh, leave it to the
Robert Townsend. Robert Townsend was the creator of that film, and he is just fantastic in it.
Oh, I've got to see it. Hollywood Shuffle. Okay, I got it etched. I think that Trump. Back to your Homie the Clown impersonation. Homie, don't play that. I think Trump needs to. I'm glad that. I hope he starts playing a little bit more hardball with Putin. I mean, I've been watching on the news all weekend that he's just, as negotiations are happening in Alaska, even, there are drone attacks by Russia. There's no ceasefire. I mean, it's just, it's this ongoing thing, and they have it's clear, very clear, that they have no interest of ceding, of giving up, of quitting. They want the whole. It seems like they want the whole thing to me. I mean, the whole of Ukraine. They're not just like going to give up a quarter of the apple. They want all of it. And, like a parasite, they're going to keep going and going until Trump says, homie, don't play that. And hits him over the head with a sock.
There you go.
I'd love to see that. But yeah, I think that he needs, I think what we should do is send over as many missiles, defensive missiles, because who could argue with defensive missiles, as much as they need. And like you brought up the point, that those are made by Americans, American companies. American stockholders own the shares of the company. So everyone benefits here in America, and they're defensive. They're not killing Russians because we want to win the hearts. And because Russians, I think, are good people. I feel like they're being held hostage by Putin. I really do. I think that he's just got such a grip, using his KGB, henchman skills, that no one can really throw him from power.
Yeah,
and I think that
as I'm fond of pointing out, regardless of what your thoughts are concerning President Trump, here's a man who has never killed or tortured another human being. He's never done that. That's what Vladimir Putin did for a living.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, that's hard. And now he's leader of the greatest landmass, bordered landmass in the world. It's like, and then he wants more. It's unbelievable. And you brought up the point, which is totally right. When you look at, I know basic Russian history. I don't know details, but I know that, all that land was basically, it's just a ton of conquered land, and that now, and they're still not, it's like in the mentality of Putin to conquer more because it's advantageous to him to have that Black Sea access, even though they already have Black Sea access. Like, this guy won't stop. I mean, with that kind of behavior, it shows that he won't stop unless he is stopped. That behavior won't stop unless somebody else stops it for him.
He once said
Which is
that
sad.
wherever a Russian soldier has put his boot, that is Russia. Well, if that's the case, then what he wants back is all the satellite countries, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, all of those, plus the eastern part of Germany. So he wants to have Russia all the way back into the middle of Europe.
Yeah, we need to quickly send as many defensive weapons. And I've been watching a lot of Ukrainian videos, and those soldiers are they're fighting the hardest fight ever. They're just, I mean, outgunned, but they're still, sending in drones. They're still putting themselves out there on the, the front, like literally within artillery range to get those drones in there. And just, and they're being real disciplined as to not, go to launch into Russia. They took some territory, but it was like pretty minor. But they're not invading into Russia. They're winning the hearts and minds of the Russians, which is smart, because you don't want the whole of that country against Ukraine. Because I think, like I said, I'm bringing up the same point, I guess, is that I feel like the Russian people really genuinely probably don't want this war. I think they think it's stupid. Frankly, it's unnecessary. They know that they're a wealthy country inherently, and if they just went about would mind their own business and keep their own territory and sell their own resources, they could be, gosh, almost as wealthy as we are, maybe more. I don't know, but I don't know. It's such a screwed up situation. But I think that Trump really needs to say, homie, don't play that. Send in some of those defense as much as Ukraine needs, just to help them rid them of the Putin parasite.
Well, that's the way I'd like to see it done, and I don't think I'm going to get my wish. I think that what's going to happen is that there's going to be some kind of a land swap pointed out, but it'll come down to the area around Donetsk. The Russians have said we want all of Luhansk and Donetsk, and there's about 15 or 20% of Donetsk they haven't conquered on the ground, but that's the place where the fortifications are. And this is a defensible position. The Ukrainians have constructed lines there that are effective at preventing the Russians from getting any further. This is why you've said you've been looking at these videos. Well, if you look at the map of Russian penetration into Ukraine, you'll notice that it really hasn't changed very much in an awful long time. And that's why. So what the Russians want is they want these defensive positions handed over to them at the peace table, so that they don't have to keep slamming up against them in combat. This would be an unpardonable sin. It would be kind of like what Chamberlain and Daladier did in handing over the Sudetenland to Germany. That destroyed Czechoslovakia's ability to defend itself, because they had defensive positions there. They had high ground that was quite defensible and a well-equipped, well-trained army. But you strip those positions, and all of a sudden Czechoslovakia is wide open. That's exactly what happened. Mr. Putin must be a student of the entire Munich crisis, because he's playing Hitler, and he's counting on President Trump to play Neville Chamberlain. And I don't think Mr. Trump wants to be Neville Chamberlain.
I don't think so either. I mean, he's really good with the flattery and stuff, but I think it's to a point. I mean, Trump's proven he can show resolve.
Right.
I think when it comes, eventually, it takes, like, I remember during his first term, what was it? Putin, I think the Russians had some planes in Syria or something that they were loaning to the Assad regime, and Assad bombed his own, gassed his own people, and Trump said, okay, and sent in a smart bomb, sent it right through that supposedly impenetrable bunker, and blew those planes up, the same ones that gassed the people after he said, don't do it. And so he can stand up to Putin, I think. That was a small thing, of course, but you have to. The only thing a tyrant understands is I'm going to be stopped if I keep this up, and I could lose my throne.
Well, the more that can be done by economic means, I'm always reminded of the fact that the Soviet Union was not brought down by missile attacks or anything of that sort. We broke their bank, and Mr. Putin is busily engaged in activity that is breaking his bank. What we should do is practice a little jujitsu. Now that he's off balance, give him a good hard shove. And we could do that by interfering with his ability to sell oil, and also by seizing. There are $300 billion in Russian assets currently sitting in American and Western banks. Take it. Use that money to finance the Ukrainian war effort.
Oh, yeah, there we go. That money is not even going to be returned. It's just going to be recycled into.
Yeah, you behaved in this fashion. You pay this fine. Not only that, but we're going to use the money to blow your behind off.
Now that's jujitsu. That's a good move right there. Yeah, that would. It's not frozen funds. It's like say goodbye.
Yeah.
To these funds.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
I like that. Yeah.
No, that's the kind of thing that needs to be done. Frankly, I think Mr. Trump is going to do that. I just wish he'd get on with it.
I think he's just, I don't know. Part of me, and because, I don't know, I know you're not religious, but I can't help but to, like, think about, like, biblical, like, end times when it comes to, you know, a nuclear armed Russia.
Yeah.
Just because it's like they possess, and we possess, and other countries possess so much firepower to destroy the world, I don't know how many times over. And I think that maybe Trump's a little, and I think this way too, I guess, I'll admit, that if you push the wolf in the corner too hard, that maybe he will actually do something so stupid. Like he's so, you know, like a tyrant is so concerned about their own power because they're selfish, that maybe they forget self-preservation and do the mad move and press the button. I don't know. Maybe Trump's thinking that. I'm speculating big time, but because I think that you know, it talks about, if you read the Bible, you know, it's like end times, Gog and Magog, and they suspect that it's like possibly Turkey and Russia maybe are going to team up, and I don't know, but it's just maybe he's thinking on that level, in you know, without saying, because otherwise why would you just wait, like you say, why take so long? And who would argue with sending Ukraine defensive missiles? It's like they're defensive missiles.
Well,
just give him what he wants.
Yeah, the thing is that I got to let you go in a second and pick up my next phone call. But one thing that there was a congressman who recently came up with this idea. Well, the Soviets or the Russians might play this game. They send over cheap drones, you know, cost $25,000. And we send over missiles that cost $1 million each to shoot them down, and that's obviously a losing game. That's you know, this guy was theorizing that this is Putin trying to break our bank, and we don't want to play that game. So, one of the things that I've seen, you've probably seen it too. If you watch these videos, Ukraine has over the past 3 years stood up a huge drone production industry of their own. They are producing drones by the millions every year. And these are far more affordable than missiles. What's needed is more sophisticated technology there. Missiles can be brought down with laser technology. This is something else that I think the future holds. And this is, Kotkin's made the point here. We've seen a lot of cutting-edge development as a result of this conflict. We're getting a look at the first 21st century war. This is nothing like what went on in the Persian Gulf and like that. This is a whole new animal.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. It's an insight into the future.
Well, listen, thank you for the call. And I'm glad you're enjoying Wilfred McClay with your kids. That's tremendously valuable. And after you've had a chance to see the Hollywood Shuffle, give me a call. Just tell me what you think.
Will do. Thank you.
Let's go to our second caller. I believe this is Evan, and find out what's on his mind today. There we are. Hello.
Hey, yeah, appreciate it, Charles. Thanks for the call. Take my call real quick at the end of your show. No, thanks, Zach, for pointing out some of those stuff. I just want to kind of put my disagreement in here real quick. I don't honestly feel like we need to start bringing any form of missiles. The U.S. has been intertwined in wars since I've been alive. I don't want the U.S. being sending missiles. I don't want the U.S. helping out in any other thing except for diplomacy now. We need to start looking into new ways of dealing with these wars because people are dying. You send missiles, you send this or that, people are dying.
I understand that.
And that's the fact.
But bear in mind that you cannot, how do I say this? I guess Mr. Trump said it the other day, it takes two to tango. That was a popular song back in the 1950s. Pearl Bailey had a million-selling record of it. But the point of it is that in this context is if one side simply decides, okay, well, I'm not going to fight, that means the other side says, okay, then we're going to take what we want. We'll just help ourselves. This is the mentality of a Hitler or a Putin. And this is why if you choose not to resist them, if you say, well, I'm not going to fight you, then that choice is essentially defeat and subjugation. Now, you might say, well, anything is better than war. Okay, if that's the point you're going to take, then we would disagree there. I frankly think that there are some things that are worse than war, and being subjugated by Russia is one of them.
No, I hear you, and I'm still on board with you guys too. I don't 100% disagree. At the same time, we just don't. The U.S. Us, we don't need to be intertwined. Let's get NATO. Let's get other countries, and if they agree, there needs to be something done. Then there needs to be something done dramatically. But for us to just hand over weapons,
Mr. Trump has done that.
That's just not.
Mr. Trump has done that.
But anyway,
I mean, I don't know if you saw it or not.
100% agree.
Mr. Trump has done that. Just the other day, there was that. The Mr. Kotkin here made light of it, but there was a fantastic event at the White House that featured not only Mr. Trump but the leaders of half the nations of Western Europe, plus Ukraine. It was a tremendous show of unity and of united purpose, and just exactly what you're talking about, bringing these other nations into the mix. So what you're urging there, that is national policy right now.
No, I find that great. Anyway, you're getting up to that 5 minute of your last bit, so I will leave you to your show. Happy Monday, and thanks again for Zach for calling in. I didn't want to be the first caller today, so appreciate it, Charles. Have a good one.
Okay, you too. Thank you very much for the call. Okay, I do have a few minutes left. I will go ahead and use them to familiarize you with just a few more of the things that Mr. Kotkin has to say here. Most importantly, the West needs severe political pressure on Putin's regime. That comes in the form of alternatives to his rule. Many prominent Russians feel Russia's on a self-defeating trajectory right now. They're nationalists. They're not Democrats. They're authoritarians. They don't look like the kind of Russian opposition we might like. But they feel that an end to the war would help Russia regain a civilian economy that it's lost. The U.S. and European intelligence agencies are recruiting them inside. We know who they are. So this is something, obviously, that you and I, as laymen, would not have any kind of privy to. He believes Mr. Trump should make an offer to these patriotic Russians in exchange for retrenchment, defined as an end to aggression against Ukraine and a turn toward focusing on developing Russia and its people and economy for the future. Well, that's essentially the truck that the approach that Mr. Trump has taken in talking with Putin. hey, forget about this war. We can build a better Russia. Mr. Putin is not interested in building a better Russia. Now, I can't remember where it was not long ago. I saw Putin described as a rational actor. I don't think he is. And that's something that a few moments ago when we were talking with Zach, he raised the possibility too. Here's a guy who, he talks about nuclear weapons. And he's got enough of them to where if one day he wakes up with his underwear in a wad, this is something that he might do. And frankly, Mr. Putin doesn't strike me as being absolutely beyond that. There are other things Mr. Trump could do. These include a removal of Russia's Gazprom Bank from the SWIFT international banking system, to which it still has access, greenlighting the confiscation of $300 billion worth of Russian deposits in European banks, getting India to stop buying Russian oil, and most audacious, cutting a deal with Xi Jinping behind Putin's back to reduce China's support for Russia. Love to see that. Of all the threats Mr. Putin faces, none is bigger than President Trump. Putin may smirk, he may walk down the red carpet strutting, he may joke for the camera with President Trump, but ultimately Trump holds the cards. And if the president used those cards, he could unsettle Putin's smirk, his self-confidence, and his maximalist demands. Well, that I mentioned when I started to share this with you. That was something that I agreed with him on, and that's what I do agree with. Mr. Trump does hold the stronger hand in dealing with Vladimir Putin. The question is, how skillfully and willingly will he use the cards that he has? Okay, one of the things I was going to get to today, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but President Trump has ordered, I guess it's 3 or 4 U.S. destroyers to sortie off the coast of Venezuela. Oh, they're in international water, but the announced purpose of this is drug interdiction. It is a fact that Maduro of Venezuela is one of the biggest drug dealers in the world. This is how he finances his country. You know, Venezuela has plenty of oil. They could finance their country by producing oil, but Mr. Maduro and his predecessor, these socialists, have so thoroughly mismanaged the nation's oil infrastructure that it is no longer nearly as productive as it was. If there was a change in a regime in Venezuela tomorrow, if it returned to a normal regime, it would take several years to bring the Venezuelan oil industry back online. Oh, it could be done, but obviously not by Mr. Maduro. He would rather use cocaine and fentanyl to do that. So Mr. Trump has made this show of gunboat diplomacy. The question many have is he going to actually go all the way and push Maduro off his nest? I would love to see that. And the other day I saw a television interview with the leader of the opposition in Venezuela, a lady named Machado, who was essentially calling for that. Will you please rid us of this destroyer? It is noon. I'll be back tomorrow at 9:06.
Good evening. As the conflict in the Middle East continues to rage, the motivations for each of the factions remain complex and difficult to understand. That's why tonight we're sitting down with a brave Hamas freedom fighter to find out what it is their organization wants. Thank you for being here tonight. What are the pressing needs of your people? What goals is it that you're working for? What deep and lasting vision are you looking to implement in the region?
I just want to kill the Jews.
Well, we might have a little bit of a language barrier here. So, because I think what you mean is that you just want to enact justice against those who are restricting your freedoms, of course.
Maybe I wasn't clear. I apologize. We want to kill all Jews who are restricting our freedom to kill more Jews.
But just so our viewers understand, when you say kill all Jews, it's a metaphor. You don't mean that literally. Much like from the river to the sea, it is an aspirational call for freedom and human rights.
Exactly. It is our aspiration to kill all Jews from the river to the sea, and then all the rest of the Jews.
In fact, are there any Jews here tonight?
What?
Maybe just one or two I could kill, so the trip over wasn't a total waste.
I don't think you can do that here. We don't do that here, right? No, that's not allowed. Yeah.
Too bad. If I killed a few Jews here, I could deduct the travel as business expense.
So you can see, of course, how the oppression that this poor person has suffered at the hands of Israel has led him to this awful extremism.
Yes, the oppression has been horrible.